Mr. Hamilton, you've recently spoken about DEI practices in healthcare. How is the Biden administration engaged in preferencing in this area? According to some, preferencing organ donations and depreferencing others on the basis of race.
Yeah, absolutely. It was kind of nuts when you sit down and you think about it. The Biden administration Biden HHS promulgated a rule. I think it was finalized in December of last year. And the rule then, of course, this new system, this new pricing incentive system that they created took effect just a couple of weeks ago. And what the system does is it creates incentive payments for medical systems to achieve equitable outcomes, which means, translation, if you read through all the bureaucraties, if you read through all the really complicated and technical language, what you will see is something that they have been trying to push for a long time, which is equity in things even like organ transplants and kidney transplants, that we're going to instead of pursuing what's in the best interest of a patient at a moment in time and trying to help everybody, that we're somehow going to now prioritize things based on equity when it comes to things like organ transplants. It's crazy.
Right. And the term equity, as Senator Kennedy was alluding to earlier, can be perceived differently by different people. If one were to use the term fairness instead, I don't think most people would disagree with the notion that scarce resources need to be dealt with in a fair manner. But our laws make certain kinds of decisions unlawful, including when they are based on race. On that note, can you provide some examples of how big business may have used DEI practices in order to terminate workers on the basis of criteria that would otherwise have been prohibited under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act? Our employment laws, for example, typically prohibit an employer from discriminating against an employee on the basis of his or her sex, race, or age. Age in many circumstances is a little bit different with each category. Have you seen that happening, or are you aware of DEI being used as a pretext, as a cudgel, a mechanism by which to engage in otherwise prohibited employment practices, sometimes the trifecta of race, sex, and age?
Absolutely. Senator Lee, there are so many instances and so many clients who have come to us, active lawsuits that we represent clients in that I won't get into the merits of here before this body, where we have evidence of corporations blatantly, whether they just tell the person, you're not of the right type, you don't have the right skin color, whether it was for promotion or whether it was for actually getting into the door of a business. Having people tell people that you don't fit the profile that we're looking for, or instead creating a pipeline, a recruiting pipeline that's only accessible to people of certain backgrounds. When you only make something accessible to people of certain backgrounds, you're excluding everyone else. I mean, it's the most common sense thing in the world, but yet corporate America for the longest time in the C-suites got bewildered by the HR recruiting kind of class who came in, all these consultants, and convinced them that somehow equity and somehow all of these special preferences was actually good for their bottom line, and it wasn't. It's nonsense, and beyond just not being good for their bottom line, it's blatantly illegal, as you pointed out.
Does Title VII contain a carve-out for the word equity, or however somebody wants to define equity?
It does not.
Does Title VII contain a carve-out for someone having benevolent objectives in mind at the time they engage in discrimination in employment on the basis of race?
Absolutely not.
So it doesn't matter what the subjective motivations or the asserted virtue of the decision maker is when it comes to an employment decision subject to Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, does it?
You're correct.
Any more so than it made a difference for the defendants in Brown versus Board of Education, when the litigants, when the lawyers said with a straight face before the highest court of the land, just across the street from us, yes, we are engaging in not just de facto but de jure discrimination. Yes, we're doing it on the basis of race. Yes, we are segregating people on the basis of their skin color. But it's okay, because our intentions are benevolent and not malicious. Is there any distinction you can draw between that kind of justification, which was soundly, wisely rejected in Brown versus Board of Education, which was a constitutional, not a statutory theory? Is there any any difference between that type of attempted justification and what we see here, other than the fact that one is statutory, the other is constitutional?
I don't see any, sir. I don't see any at all. Benevolent intentions or even malicious intentions led to the abhorrent doctrine of separate but equal that the Supreme Court rightly overturned in Brown versus Board. Anytime you have fissures forming in a society like the United States, where you have people from all over the world who've come here to live here together, anytime that you have things where people are trying to create these fractures in the American populace, and even if it's benevolent intentions or not, we have to treat all American citizens the same, regardless, because that's what Congress said, and that's what the Constitution guarantees.
As Associate Justice John Marshall Harlan noted in his classic dissent in Plessy versus Ferguson, speaking against the outrage that was and is the separate but equal doctrine, the Constitution requires that we not make decisions on the basis of someone's race. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Mike Lee, Republican, Utah, pressed America's first legal president Gene Hamilton on whether corporations are using diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) programs as a cover for practices that would otherwise be prohibited under federal law. The exchange centered on Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which bars employers from discriminating against workers on the basis of race, sex, or age. Hamilton pointed to multiple ongoing lawsuits in which employees were allegedly denied promotions or even entry into companies explicitly because they did not fit a particular racial or gender profile. He described cases where individuals were told outright that they were not the right type or did not have the right skin color, and situations where companies created recruiting pipelines available only to people from select backgrounds. According to Hamilton, these practices exclude others by design and amount to blatant discrimination, regardless of whether they are framed as equity measures. Lee pressed Hamilton on whether the law allows any exceptions for so-called benevolent intentions. Hamilton responded that Title VII contains no carve-outs for equity or other subjective motives, stressing that discrimination remains illegal even if the stated goal is fairness or balance. He drew a direct parallel to arguments made in Brown versus Board of Education, where segregation was defended on grounds of benevolence but ultimately struck down as unconstitutional. Hamilton warned that allowing DEI-based exceptions risks fracturing society by treating citizens differently based on race or other characteristics. He emphasized that both Congress and the Constitution require equal treatment under the law, echoing Justice John Marshall Harlan's famous dissent against separate but equal in Plessy versus Ferguson.